Joe, my man.
What's going on, man?
Oh, not much, man. It's great to see you.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
I have these conversations all the time.
Well, I'm excited. Yeah, this is the first time we've sat down together.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell the listeners, the viewers, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of get into things from there.
I'm Joe Weigant. I'm a Reiki master. I just completed massage therapy school, so I work on, I do massage therapy. I was a police officer for 23 years. Currently, I'm back into law enforcement for the time being. Right now, I work for a university police department, so I'm back into that. But I run Tri-State Holistic Wellness, which is focused on mind, body, and spirit healing. And so realizing that neither of those three things is a separate entity, that it all is connecting to make us what we are and who we are. My focus with that is to heal the mind, body, and spirit by encouraging people to unlearn what they have learned and try to learn something new about who they are and what they are that is empowering and not crippling. So I try to encourage my clients to drop the white flag of victimhood and grab the banner of empowerment, to get out of the trunk and actually get behind the wheel of the car and drive their life the way that it should be going, instead of just doing everything by rote or just following a program or a protocol and just going through life and wondering why it's over or wondering why it sucks. So if I can empower people to take charge of their lives and live their life with purpose and meaning, well, then when they get to the end of their life, they can look back on something that they've accomplished instead of just, well, I watched a lot of football games and I never missed an episode of the Kardashians, so therefore I've had a full life. Well, no, not really. What are you doing with your life? What have you done with it since you've come here? And so that's what I try to get people into thinking in that general direction of, what is your life? What did you come here to do? You didn't come here to watch TV and pay taxes and die. You didn't agree to manifest into earth for that purpose. So that's what I try to do for people, is to let them realize what gift they brought and what lesson they needed to learn, and then to manifest that so that way they can learn their lessons instead of just carrying the pain.
Very cool.
I also do I do a lot of paranormal work as well. I call myself a paranormal resolution specialist as opposed to an investigator. I'm the guy who goes in there and actually, solves problems when people say they got something going on in their homes, as opposed to just making a recording and go, yeah, your house is pretty jacked up, dude. Call a priest. See ya. And then, I got this laptop full of voices that doesn't really mean anything to anybody else but me. So I've been in groups like that, and yeah, they got their purpose. They're trying to find the answers of what happens beyond all this and all. But I go in and cross people over and help the dead and the living achieve some peace and some lasting meaning. And so that's how I go about that business.
I know a little more about you, so I don't want to rush over too many things. So, how did you get into the police work? And, so my trying to learn more about Joe is, you've obviously had a gift, and, I think I told you a little bit, like I'm listening to the Sean Ryan episode with Sean Webb, who's talking about remote viewing. And mm-hmm. I think you have some similarities there. So, I guess I'm interested in early Joe. Mm-hmm. And when did you know or have an inclination of having the ability to do some of the things that you do? Where and why the direction of the police department? And kind of then we'll talk maybe a little bit about, okay, then why did you get back into the holistic side of things? And sure. Then we could talk about a little bit more of your personal journey that I know you've got a really interesting story to tell there.
When I was a kid, I had all kinds of things that were happening to me. We grew up in a haunted house. And so whenever the lights went out and everybody turned off the TVs, it was time to go to bed. there was always sounds and things coming like out of the furnace, and things would be moving around the house on their own. Several times I would watch things get up and dance across the kitchen table. Things would be moving. One time when I was a teenager, we got into almost a tug of war over the TV with our ghost. And so we were all wanting to sit down and watch a particular movie, and every time we'd click it over, the ghost would click it back to another show. And this went on and on and on. And so finally we started, having fun and kind of goofing around with it a little bit. And we took the batteries out of the remote, put the remote in another room, and I'm standing there in front of the family pushing the channel for HBO or whatever it was. And my mom had kind of named the ghost Dewey. And she's sitting on the couch and she says, "Dewey, damn it, now knock that off right now. I've had enough of this." And, well, that was it. That was it. We got to watch whatever show we were trying to watch after, the 15 minutes we missed or whatever. But that kind of stuff happened all the time growing up.
Okay, so when you said obviously your mother also was seeing and understanding the things that were going on.
I think she was understanding what was going on, and I think she had a little bit of an insight as to there is something here, but I don't know if she was ever able to actually really tune in. She spent a lot of time not fully conscious. She drank a lot.
Okay.
So there was that bit of it. But I think my mother and her father both had a little bit of insight on some things, and I think they both ignored it. And I mean, there was a time whenever, I think it was in the summer, and I was up eating some cereal and, going to head outside and do what we do and go outside and play all day. And I looked over at her, and she was watering some plants in the kitchen. And I noticed this big red aura around her, and it had, like dots moving around and swirling about. And I can remember telling her, like, "You've got this big red glow around you, and there's like yellow dots and like some orange swirls and stuff floating around in that." And she said, "Blink your eyes, knock it off, eat your cereal, and get out of this house." And so from that point forward, I didn't see aura in color anymore because, she said, "Knock that off, forget about it." But, I would see things as a kid all the time, and I never really thought anything about it. It's like, well, that's just the way it is. And I got into law enforcement. I was actually interested in law enforcement after I graduated high school, but I wanted to go to college to learn how to design computers. And that turned out to be a big fat mistake. So I wound up doing a bunch of stupid different kinds of jobs. And I realized, okay, I don't want to do the same thing every day for the rest of my life. And with law enforcement, every day is different. You might be dealing with the same, 7% of the population every single night you come into work, but it's going to be different. And I wasn't really in tune with my skills or abilities or what I was doing, but I was using them all the time by reflex. Being able to find people in a building was natural for me. Like, I know that's where he's hiding. And I would go in there, and that's where the guy was hiding. Or being able to detect when a guy was going to try to take a swing on you, or if he was reaching for something he shouldn't have. I would always get that hint, you need to move to the left. And I would move, and that would have saved my life or whatever. And so there were just dozens of those kinds of encounters where I knew something that I probably shouldn't be able to know, but by knowing it and having that idea that, okay, this is a bad place, or this is where he might hide, or this is what he's reaching for, or that's where he put it, and it's always there, or it's always happening that way. And even, whenever cops have a run, and you might have 2 or 3 cars that'll show up at a house or whatever. Well, afterwards, we all stand out in the street and have a little choir practice for about 5 minutes afterwards, and we get in the cars and go on again. And I would always see shadows moving from place to place. We'd stand out in the street, and there'd be a shadow moving from the car to the house, or from the garage to the tree, or from the tree to that truck. And I would ask, the other guys, "Did you see that guy moving across the yard over there?" And they never did. And so I just stopped asking. And so I just, okay, well, the whole time I'm standing outside, there's there's shadows walking about. Okay, well, fine, whatever.
Did you ever question yourself? Like, did you, at any point, I can imagine as a kid, you're seeing things that other people don't see. And I imagine maybe your mom struggled with that. And, the reason why she went the way she went maybe is because, I know your abilities now are kind of becoming more and more mainstream. Right. But when you were a kid and prior, there was witch trials, and anybody that was different or saw things that others didn't could be considered crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
So did you ever wonder okay, am I imagining this? Did you ever struggle with that, or did it always just seem real and to the point where well, I'm sorry nobody else gets it, but here it is?
As a kid, you learn really quickly never to talk about that, and so you just deal with it. And I can remember having visions or sitting on the couch and things would happen, or I would get an entire thing laid out before me. And at the end I would go, well, that was weird. Okay. All right. So that just happened, and just go on with it. But, back in the 70s, there was no internet. Libraries weren't filled with books on this stuff. There was no information to go out and find. You didn't have that instant access to everything like we do now. I can Google anything right now and get pages and pages and pages of documents. That's all I do all day is research this and that and whatever, and look into these kinds of things and subscribe to different newsletters. None of that existed. And so there's probably, 1 million people just like me that were raised all the way from the 20s and 30s all the way up to the 70s and 80s who, we all have the ability to do these things. Every single one of us. We're all wired for this. This is what we are. And it's because we are spirit driving these funny meat suits. This is the inherent condition of mankind. We choose to ignore it.
I don't know if we choose to ignore it as a society. I think we are trained to ignore it.
Yes.
I think we're dissuaded, and we could get into a lot of conspiracies here as to why.
Oh, I'm sure we could.
We don't need to be tapped into too much knowledge and be able to communicate with people above, let's say above the people who want to be controlling the narratives and what we're thinking about. I think you and I would align there pretty quick. So I love where we're at. Let's go back a little bit to the police department. Mm-hmm. I know enough about you to know you became a detective. That seems like duh.
Yeah. You
were going to become a detective, but how did you get to that point in your career? And, what was kind of the natural process of you saw things and you could intuit things. It's a natural segue to, yeah, of course I'm going to be a detective, but how did that physically manifest itself?
Well, there was a story about how I got into the detective's office. I probably shouldn't talk about it.
Okay, that's fine.
There were some things that were happening on the streets, and it was, I was the one showing up for work while everybody else was in specialty units. And so a lot of people weren't coming into work because they were getting days off to go do unit type things. I got tired of being the only guy showing up to work all the time. And so the job that I always wanted was in financial crimes anyway, and it opened up and I was able to get that job. I got that job partly because of the stuff that I know with energy and how to move it and what to do with it and how to use mental power to create and manifest things. That was how I was able to get into that position. I set that job up specifically to get it. Now, as far as my abilities within that job, the most frustrating part of that was talking across the table from somebody and I know they're lying. I know they're holding back. I just didn't have the verbal and investigative skill set to be able to coax it out of them. And I would get about 80 to 85% of what I needed, enough to make my case. But it was it was never the full story, even though I know there's still something down in there I got to dig up. I just didn't have the skills at that level to be able to pull all that out. But that was the most frustrating part, is sitting across the table from somebody and I know they're lying. And I can feel that everything that, that 80% of what they're saying is true, but 20% of what they're saying is false. And 20% of what they haven't said is the truth still down there. And trying to get that out of people was frustrating. So
yeah, I imagine like you're thinking the juicy nugget is really, it has not been uncovered yet. I'm not quite there, and had you had the time and the skill set in that moment, I mean, that you probably would have uncovered things that would have blown most people's minds.
Law enforcement was fun when it was fun. That's what I can say.
Well, we don't need to get into that political trail, but
no.
Did you start doing what you do now more while you're still in active law enforcement? I mean, I know you've transitioned to another role now, so it's different than it was.
Oh yeah.
So what kind of finally made you focus much more on what the path you took, and the particular pieces of what you do now? Because there's a bunch of different practices that people can do. There's a bunch of different directions and channels, and I think you're trying to pull in all kinds of different things all the time. So like, if you're like me, you're always like, what's the next new best thing that I can learn that's going to evolve me to where I can help the most amount of people, right?
Correct.
So it's not the shiny object necessarily that some people get, like, always got to go after the new thing. It's more of the more, if most people have a level of consciousness and understanding that here, and Joe can come and you're here, but there's some other level, and I've got Facebook reels right now that are, I think the name of the gentleman is Said Guru or something, but I see these people that are clearly spiritually enlightened to a level that everything seems so easy, and someone can ask them a question and it's like a sage, and you're taught, I think, in a lot of instances to turn away from people like that, because what are they trying to scam out of you, right? That's a whole nother thing we could talk about. But then there's people that have a certain energy that you just can't ignore and you can't discredit. But at the end of the day, for me, you always have to be a little skeptical, because some people can take that and use that in a maniacal way. And so, like, that's the real risk that we run into. Any politician or anybody, the next Jesus Christ, someone that is claiming to be something and has the ability and the hypnotic effect where they can pull people into their level, to manipulate them. There's a lot of stories we could talk about there, but I guess, trying to get into where you think you're heading and why might be an interesting segue now. Like,
I've studied martial arts since age 18. I graduated high school and I started taking martial arts, and I studied with, 11 different teachers and studied a whole bunch of different styles. And I wound up doing the Dillman karate pressure point methods. And the pressure points, you can go online and there's maps and there's drawings. I have a three-dimensional rubber doll in my office that has all the points and the meridians mapped out on it. And the concept is, if you're able to activate some of these points in the right way and in the right order, you can create things in the body. Like, you can short circuit the nervous system momentarily. And if they're not awake, they can't fight. So actually, for fun, what we would do is all of us black belts would sit around after class, after we sent everybody else home, and we would all do pressure point knockouts and knock each other out for another half an hour. And so,
you called this fun.
Yeah. Well, it is not the same as like a Mike Tyson concussive knockout.
Right.
You take a violent blow to the head, and that knockout is caused by the skull moving, and it's like people in a car, or it's like a racquetball in a shoebox, okay? You shake the shoebox back and forth, and the racquetball inside goes blah, 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 blah. And so that creates damage to the brain, and it makes the brain close off and shut down because now it's suffered a violent trauma. And this was a nervous system switch off. So we would knock each other out by never even touching the head, just hitting arm points or a chest point or something like that. And by getting into the energy and the way the energy moves through the body, I wanted to learn how to be able to do that better. And I ran into a Tai Chi instructor. And about a year into doing the Tai Chi, I kept saying, man, my hands are on fire. My hands are on fire. And he looks at me one day and he says, have you ever heard of Reiki? I said, no, I have no idea what that means. And he says, well, you need to get a session first. But if you're interested, I'll teach you. Okay, great. So I had a session with him. And it was incredible. I mean, this is as relaxed as you're ever going to feel. And after he got finished, I said, okay, yeah, I want to learn how to do that. And so he taught me, and then I learned from another person, and I learned from a couple other people. And that was in 2008 when I first started studying Reiki. And in 2009, after I'd gotten through his training, I said, the whole world needs to know about this. Like, everybody needs to be in a place where they feel this good. And so I started just going around work and telling people about it. And it all started off with, oh, you've got a headache? Well, here, let me work on that. And I would take what I knew about pressure points and add Reiki to it. And I was solving headaches. People would, come in with an injury, and I would help with the injuries or whatever. And I started taking clients just from like some people at work and some people that I was teaching karate to. And it started going on from there. And I think that because of the way Reiki works, you're literally tapping into the energy of the universe and allowing it to flow through you into another person so that way you can heal them and get them set right. And when you start tapping into the energy of the universe, you start getting a lot of information coming at you. And so I started, honestly, this journey started because while I was working on people and really tuning into the energy and where it's moving and trying to erase blockages or solve stagnations or anything like that in their body, I was seeing pictures, or I would see like short 3-second movies, or I would get a message or something, and I would talk to the people afterwards, like, okay, when I was working on you in this last hour, this is something that came to me, and it might be important to you or it might not, but I think you need to know about this. And it was always something very important that was either going on in their lives or something they had held on to since childhood or some other traumatic event that meant nothing to me. But by relaying that, it allowed them to focus on, yes, this happened and I never took care of that. I never resolved it. And it was always healing for them in some way. So I ran into some people who were even better at that kind of work than I was and started learning from them. And one of them also taught me how to do house clearings, just paranormal type of work of going into a home, picking up on what was happening in the house energetically with people or energy in the house or whatever, and then resolving that issue. And then that got into things like the law of attraction, and it got into like how to manifest and how to create energy results. And that's where I am today. And so a lot of the things like when we were talking about the remote viewing, a lot of that is either it can be used as an exercise to get you to use your subconscious mind correctly, or it can be the end game in itself, like with the remote viewing project that the government ran for so many years. And so
still running,
yes. There are a lot of exercises people can use to expand how their mind works.
I want to delve into that, but let's circle back around because you touched on a couple of things here that was very intriguing to me. Mm-hmm. As we're talking about we haven't talked about it, but I've always thought about ways that what's the best way to train our children to have self-defense at the youngest of ages. And you talked about the nervous system shut off versus the learning to strike and punch, which is more permanent damage potentially, both to you and to the person that you're punching or doing something worse to. When you system shut off someone and you learn all these points, is there no permanent damage typically from that, or never at all? I mean, I don't know anything about. I'm certain you probably could, if you did it hard enough for long enough, you could do some stuff. But it sounds like it's a much more kinder, gentle way to put someone out and to take control of the situation, which to me is like kind of the end goal of personal protection, right?
Right.
If you don't have to kill someone, that's the best way to do it.
If you don't have to kill somebody, and if you also don't have to eye gouge them or bust their teeth out of their face or break their jaw or something like that, yeah, any time that you can control a situation is always better than having to go into a place where, okay, well, now you have to go in front of a judge because you broke the dude's jaw. There's that fine line between I'm defending myself and now I'm the aggressor. And
slippery slope, as it were.
There's a lot of people who train in fighting who they blur that line sometimes. Okay, I'm not now just defending myself. Now I'm punishing you because you had the balls to stand up here and confront me. And now I've stepped into that place where I'm the aggressor now. And that can get real dangerous for a lot of people really quickly, legally. And
well, that's why the UFC exists today, right?
Actually,
so people want a free access to go do that until they're stopped by some guy in the middle.
Well, the UFC, and I only watch snippets of it now, but way back when it started, it was very interesting because, see, the question of UFC was, what happens if you take a kung fu guy against a judo guy? What happens if you take a Navy boxer and you put him up against a college wrestler? What happens if you take somebody who's trained in Japanese jiu-jitsu their whole lives and you put them up against somebody who's a savate trainer, okay? And so it was originally a question of which one of these styles is really effective, and then where's that line blurred between the man and the style? Is it the style that failed that fight, or was it the man who failed to utilize the style in that fight? And we learned really quickly that some styles were meant for sport, and some styles were meant to break people down and break them apart and hurt them really badly. And some styles were meant for just going out and doing contests and sports and things like that. What it became was everybody found out that boxing, as far as the striking arts, was exceptionally effective. The slips, the dodges, the hooks and punch and jab combinations, being able to get inside, fighting on the outside while standing up, boxing was really, really effective. But then whenever it came down to, well, a lot of fights go to the ground. And so people realize I have to have some wrestling because I have to be able to take a guy down. And then once I get down there, what am I going to do? Because in wrestling, you hold him for 3 seconds and then the referee comes in and says that's enough, but there's no referee in the parking lot.
Yeah, there's rules to what you're doing on the wrestling mat.
Oh, yes,
there's
there
certain things you can't do that don't come into reality.
But in the parking
streets.
lot,
yeah.
You can mess somebody up real bad.
Real quick.
Or you can get messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever Hoist Gracie came out there and was doing a standing armbar upside down in UFC 3, and no one had ever seen that before. I mean, we've seen some arm bars where he's lying on his back, but he did an arm bar upside down with his legs wrapped around this guy's shoulders and arm barred this dude while he was standing and Hoist was upside down. And I looked at that and said, okay, that's some crazy crap right there. Yeah. Okay. And so when everybody realized how effective the Brazilian style of jiu-jitsu was, now UFC is all the same kind of fighting. It's no longer that question of judo versus kung fu. Now it's everybody can box, everybody can wrestle, and everybody does the arm bars and the chokes. And they all know how to do the pass through, and they all know how to do the guard and the mount and all that. So it has become like boxing. Everybody fights the exact same way. And it's just who's the better fighter. What I don't appreciate about the UFC is the lack of honor some of these fighters exude. I was always taught, okay, you knock a guy down, he either chooses to stay down or he can get back up, and you have to knock him back down again to prove to him the second time that it wasn't a fluke. Please don't get up the third time, because now I'm really going to have to hurt you a little bit. What I don't appreciate about the UFC is you knock a guy off his balance and then you pounce on his face and elbow him in his mouth about 30 times before the ref can get there, and you're breaking a guy permanently. This was just a fight for money, man. This is not me defending my home. This was a fight for money in a steel ring. And these guys can't wait to jump on your face and knee you in the face until your face bones break. And like that's not the purpose of this fight.
I think that's an effect of all these different fighters coming basically out of their own dojos, and there's no uniform training. And some of these people have had atrocious lives, and they don't have the wherewithal and the emotional, spiritual aspect to life and the connectivity to everyone. They are just a raw animal, probably much closer to maybe a werewolf or something than they are to an enlightened being. And so, I fully agree with what you're saying as far as the not liking it part. I don't like seeing people like that, but I fully understand it.
Yeah.
And, you hope that they can evolve. You kind of look at a young Mike Tyson to a Mike Tyson sitting today, and in the spiritual journey that he's gone on, yes. I think his fighting, would he be as good now, having the brain that he has now back in that old body? Maybe better. I don't know. Maybe not, because his killer instinct probably got him some things along the way there. So I think there's a delicate balance there for some guys, and some guys just aren't going to have that switch of,
correct,
being able to do that yet. Anyway, I think I agree with you that everybody has the inherent ability to tap into that level of consciousness, but wherever they're at in their journey, if they're just focusing on this and how I'm going to put you down and out as fast as I can, they don't really focus on some of that other stuff maybe along the way.
I agree with Gichin Funakoshi, who was the progenitor of Shotokan karate, when he said the purpose of karate is not to make you a fighter, because when you're 70, you're not going to be doing too much fighting anyway. But he said the purpose of karate in and of itself is perfection of character. How willing are you to get up every day and do the same training every single day, to do the same katas, the same forms, to punch that same bag and get up and put yourself through that every day? Do you have the discipline to forge yourself? And what happens at the end of the day, what happens in the dojo between you and another student is simply you testing where you are. And some days you win, some days you lose. Sometimes you get hit, sometimes you hit. Sometimes you get the choke, sometimes you get choked. But it's always a friendly contest of a test of your skill level. But you got there because of discipline to forge yourself. And I think that's what the martial arts needs to get back to in its core, is the ability to forge yourself. Not to perfect your animal instincts of killing or hurting somebody else just because now you have the skills to do so. I think a lot of people, and a lot of people I've met over the years, after training in martial arts, they get to the point where eventually you don't want to fight. You don't want to go out and try to get into a fight, because it's not a cool thing to do. I know I can take you out. I don't have to prove it to me or you. I'd rather just not fight and just say, yeah, buddy, let me just buy you a beer. Look, yeah, okay, I screwed up. All right. Yeah, I didn't realize that was your girl when I stared at her butt or whatever. You know what? You're right. I'm a complete jerk because I didn't realize she was dating you. Let me buy you a beer and make this up. Instead of, oh, yeah, let me show you what I got here. And
I think that's a natural segue. So let's talk about the animal in the UFC scenario, and transition them into where you've gotten with, from the nervous system shut off to transitioning for you is kind of what most people need to do. And I think it also helps uncover that animal, like, that animal instinct that fighter has. They may have come from a very troubled background. They could have been in a very abusive world. They've got scars. They got things that they would never tell anybody in there unless someone trains them to understand what that means and evolve them out of that. So
yeah,
I think that's kind of a natural path to kind of where you've ended up in your journey and what you're trying to learn and accomplish, and then hopefully maybe share it with people that might be able to transition even further themselves that way.
We had a student years ago, and she was this little bitty tiny, she was like 100 pounds, little girl, and she was a senior in high school. And she had had a lot of surgeries, and her spine was basically a complete cage. She was half Terminator is how much metal she had in her spine, and she was not really mobile very much. And so we taught her a lot of joint locks and finger locks and how to use pressure points and things like that. And she graduated high school and said, well, I'm going away for college, but I'll try to come back over breaks or whatever. So she comes back over Christmas break after her first year away at college. I don't even know where she went. And she pulls me aside and she says, I got to tell you a story. I was walking home from the dorm, or from class, and was heading toward the dorms, and this guy wanted to quote, walk me home. And she said, yeah, okay, I'll remain here with you on this sidewalk as we walk, just in case something stupid happens, whatever. Well, then he started getting fresh. And he put his arms around her waist and was like, hey, why don't you come over here and come back to my dorm first, whatever. And she said, I put him in a finger lock and put him down on the concrete and said, don't ever touch me, because I'm gonna hurt you a little bit. And she got up and walked away. She goes, that was the end of that confrontation. I don't know how it would have gone had I not known how to do those things. And so, me as a teacher, I thought, well, that was cool that I was able to give somebody that kind of empowerment to say, I won't be a victim, and I won't be pushed around, and I will not be manipulated that way, that I do have not only what it takes to defend myself, but I've given myself permission to defend myself. And so that was empowering for the both of us, knowing I helped somebody ahead of time be able to accomplish something like that, so that way she could get out of a situation. And so it's those kinds of things which I still hold that story, knowing that happened.
Well, it seems like a very effective thing, like you said, for smaller people, for kids who have bigger people picking on them. I think there's probably some kind of game that you would play there a little bit with. I think if it gets in just to a power battle and you're a much smaller person with a much bigger person, they can't overpower you. And the pressure, you'd have to learn how to get the right pressure and the right point or the right finger. But if there was a little game that you played there for a minute, like I could imagine this girl walking down the street and he's making those advances and she's not getting, like, get off me right now. But she's thinking, okay, his hand's right there. What am I going to do with that finger? And I'm going to make him think that maybe I'm allowing something to happen until I get the angle on that finger that I need, and then I'm going to rip his finger off if I need to, and he won't know what's coming. I think that would be a really kind of a fun game to learn. And it's, it helps with your staying calm under the situation where you could freak out and start screaming and maybe not be good for anything.
Right.
As opposed to, being a little bit of a deceptor and saying, oh yeah, I'll play your game for you until I'm not going to play it with you anymore. And then it's, I think that's a pretty interesting thing for people to use as a self-defense tactic.
A lot of that, I think, has to do with being able to use your intuition to read people and read the situation and read where you are. There's a lot of things that need to be taken into account during those kinds of confrontations, and being able to think beyond the logical and think into the intuitive and understand, okay, what is around me? What do I have available to me? What is the nearest thing I can do? Being able to have that mindset of what do I have available to use and what can I do and where is this going? Some of that, the reason women are naturally more inclined to intuition is because they have had to think about some of those things and gauge the energy of the people that they're dealing with in a way that they can get some insight as to what could or possibly might happen. And I think I think that's largely why a lot of my clients are women, because they are realizing that they do have that power of tapping into intuition. And many of them, if I bring up that I'm sure that you've used this at work to be able to gather some information that no one else is able to gather, but there's always some guy in the room that tells you you're off your rocker because, look, I'm looking at these forms right here and I'm looking at these printouts and that's not on the printout. Like these figures don't match. And, she might just be telling the boss or the team or the clients or whatever, the number on the page isn't what's important. I think what's happening is there's something here behind this that we need to pay attention to. And a lot of times they're dismissed right out. And so a lot of women no longer trust their intuition and trust their subconscious mind. And whenever they realize that it's that overpowering, it creates some confusion and some stress and anxiety. And well, those things cause us physical harm. And so we get into that whole thing about how do we leave logic and tap into the intuitive mind while still consciously being aware of the information that we're gathering from it. And that is a tightrope to walk. And so it can be used in a corporate setting. It can be used in your personal life. That can be used in fighting. I've talked myself out of a lot more fights than I've ever talked myself into, either out in the world or in a law enforcement situation. Just being able to find out and determine where a person is and how committed they are to what they want to do can determine whether or not you can dissuade them from wanting to go that route. Somebody wants to puff up their chest and try to be the bigger aggressor, but you're reading that they don't really wanna, you have a better chance of talking them out of something than trying to talk them into something. They'll go there if you want to keep running that road, but if you can pick up that, yeah, they're really not fully on board with that, then there's a way for you to dissuade those kinds of things from happening.
Well, I think you've tapped into something here, Joe. I want to go into a little deeper. You talked about women being most of your clientele for obvious reasons, and everything you said makes good sense to me. For me, the last few years has really put a spotlight on some things, society level things, and in a way that we all seem very disconnected. We seem very fearful. We're afraid to talk about things. We're afraid to, step outside of the tribal thinking and stuff that's going on at a societal level. And I feel like, for our society to get back on track, we need some kind of a unifying mission of some sort, and we've gone through several unifying missions throughout the history of our country, and the world history talks a lot about, people unifying and rising above, and there's a lot of stories there. As we've become more of a less religious society, and I think religion has a very strong purpose in our society because it allows people to unify around an idea of caring for other people and whatever, and that's important. I would never try to dissuade that, And people have often asked me whenever I started talking about, well, why are you doing the podcast and why do you have the mission that you have, and why aren't you, why don't you talk about religion more, or why can't we unify? I'm like, well, there's a lot of reasons, but I don't want to be in the business of justifying why I'm approaching this from a religious aspect. If someone comes and wants to listen to the ideas that we're trying to explore here, I don't want them to say, well, they're that whatever, Christian, Catholic, you name the denomination,
Sure.
you know. So right away, it's like that's not going to work for me. So then I got to cross a barrier to, you know, how do we bridge that gap if you're already tuned out? Because I start with let's do this particular spiritual practice that I believe in that you don't believe in. Then we're trying to figure out what that means, and I think people should be absolutely focusing on that, and I think it's a worthwhile journey. But the moral of what I'm trying to get to with this with you is a societal level awakening of some sort, tapping into an energy that is not religious specifically, but is above and beyond religion. And I want to talk a little bit about maybe some things that we can do. We don't have to delve into this too deeply on this particular podcast. I think we found enough things we can dig into, but you know, there's a lot of trauma out there. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of people that have, some people call them demons, and some people call it mental and physical injuries that they never quite get rid of. And so the goal for me in this platform is to bring to light some things that people can look to and do that they can trust that this is a potential path for me. Or, you know, and it's not the path that I was taught. It's not the path that, you know, my church might teach me, or my karate guru, or, you know, whoever it is.
Sure.
Let's get a group of people together and start having these conversations about, you know, and I've looked into psychedelic therapy just because I'm interested in its success, and if it can take people from where they are in a really, really bad spot into a place where they're not in such a bad spot. And is that forever and ever what they should be doing? I don't know. There's a lot of history of psychedelics going back into ancient civilizations. So not to get into that specifically, but part of this for me is creating a platform and a space where people can go to and hear experts in areas discussing with other experts in those areas, and raising kind of a level of awareness and enlightenment to where we can be a little less afraid, and we can start having the strength and the courage to ask questions, and to not, you know, sit back while the powers that be out there do tyranny on me, or, you know, whatever it is. Like COVID in the last few years shined a light for a lot of people. It was like kind of an awakening, like, holy moly, what just happened? I never thought something like that could happen in Canada or in Australia, let alone in America. And then you see just kind of the mass psychosis that went down. Nobody's talking about what that did to our kids, what kind of potential permanent damage that's done to their development, what we might do to heal them in the best way that we potentially can, because we're just all kind of ignoring it right now. It's not even being talked about. And I'm very concerned about not only my kids, but the kids that are going to be future adults that my kids have to grow up with. So I feel like we need to explore some ideas that aren't us, let's just go pray about it. Like, go do that. Continue doing that. Go to, you know, I'm a Catholic family, but to heal society, it's going to have to be something that's above just a religious practice, I think. And so I think some of the things you're tapping into here are some people will, you know, back in the day would have called it self-help. And I've read several Tai Chi books, and I've practiced a little bit, not as much as I should. So for me, I'm looking like, okay, if I can do the discipline, and I've got so many hours in a day, and I can dedicate this time every single day to do the things to get me where I want to be in life, what are those things? What are those things I need to do? And I think this conversation, we can hopefully explore that with each other and for other people. And I don't even know where I'm going with that as far as a question being back there to you, but, you know, how do you think that we could take this and use it broadly to heal society and to bring people together at a I don't know if you want to call it spiritual level or a humanity. I don't know. You know, I don't know. I feel like, you know, we're sold fear. We're sold the Russians are bad. The Ukrainians are good. The Ukrainians are bad. Israel's right. Palestine's wrong. Palestine's wrong. Israel's right. At some level, if we can just communicate with each other outside of the news and the leaders who want war always.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like we're tapping into something. I feel like there's an energy going, and you hear it on Rogan's, you hear it on the Sean Ryan shows, you hear it on Lex Friedman. I mean, all these people are talking about, even I think RFK Jr. is talking about something a little more unifying and not the old way of doing things. So I feel like this is a perfect opportunity after we've been blindsided by something as we have since 2020 to really do some introspection and to really start rewriting some rules or some guidelines or some, at least acknowledge what has happened, acknowledge the problems that it's caused, and like, what are we really doing about it? So I don't know where the question is, but maybe take something and pull it out of there. And you've lived through the last few years. I think you and I believe similarly about where society is, and it's probably not trending, hasn't been trending in a great direction.
No.
So, like, what can we do to make it a little better? And, what can we be talking about to make it a little better, or to give others hope that there's a path that they can get on, and then potentially bring them with them without getting, I don't know. We don't want to freak people out because, we're not trying to create a cult here.
No.
For me, it's just about personal help and taking a path that makes you better.
I think we need to start with one of the inherent qualities of humanity is the fear of, or it's the feeling of belonging. Okay. We want to have a family. We want to have a tribe. I think whenever we start getting cities that have become so large, we get lost and there is no tribe. Whereas traditionally, historically, smaller villages were a little closer and you were more apt to go out of your way to protect your neighbors than you are, let's say, in New York City or like Mexico City is 30 million people. I mean, that's no longer a tribe. That's just a collection or a gathering of a bunch of individuals. And the tribe part of it is gone. But along that route, some very smart people have played that and made it into a fear of not having a tribe. And so when you start looking at how products in this country are marketed, we start looking at this whole thing that we've now started to call it FOMO. We started, like 5 years ago, this whole thing about FOMO, fear of missing out. Oh, no, I won't have that if I don't play along. And I've even written about some of these things in my blog about how are you marketed to? What are you being sold? And why are you spending your money on it? Because you want to be like everyone else? Or do you want to have the strength to stand up as an individual? So back in the 30s and 40s, there was a brand of floor cleaner. This is back whenever the vinyl flooring and the linoleum and all that was real big back then. They were covering up wood floors with all that, and they were getting wall-to-wall carpeting was the big thing and all that. So they had a floor cleaner that worked really, really well, but it wasn't selling enough, because that's the problem in America is I don't care if I churn out a good product. What I want to do is churn out a profit. And I don't care if I help people. I don't care if I make a product that's worthwhile. What I care about is taking care of my stockholders and my investors. That's the bottom line. Now, if I can cut my staff back by a third and make the 2/3 that are left over do that other work for the same amount of money, then I've boosted my profits. So what happened was they took this floor cleaner and they found out that the ingredients in it clean more than floors. And so they went to some marketing company and said, "Oh, how do we sell this stuff? How do we make it where it's in every house in America?" Well, they put a little peppermint in it and they sold it as a mouthwash. But how they sold it is important. You can go to marketing school. You can go online and Google up the halitosis campaign. The word halitosis was invented to sell a floor cleaner as a mouthwash. And the ads all ran like this. They would show a woman in the 1940s or 1950s, and like, are you not being invited to all of your girlfriend's house parties? Is no one coming to your house party? Why is it that you feel you're so alone? Why don't people like you? You may have halitosis. Now they've created a fear. Maybe my breath smells like, like feet. I don't know. It just might be why nobody comes to my dinner parties. But what's the solution to that? We've already created it. It's called Listerine. And that was a floor cleaner they turned into a mouthwash, and they sold it to you under the guise of bad breath. And now it's in every house in America. And you can look up the halitosis sales campaign. They use it for everything. They've used it ever since that day. They first have to create a fear. Then they have to create a problem generated, or they create the problem, and then they make you afraid of that problem, and they've already got the solution. Now, we already know that with this whole COVID thing, and I'm not going to get into conspiracy, I'm going to get into what we really know.
Well, don't say anything that might get us taken off YouTube.
Yeah. Well,
never mind. We're going to be Rumble and Spotify and other places that don't do that kind of thing.
So, but we know they were working on this mRNA thing for years. I actually subscribed to the guy who invented mRNA,
Robert Malone.
Yeah.
He's incredible.
I read all of his newsletters. Okay, the man's incredible, and he said several times after this thing got released upon us, that was never what that was supposed to be invented for. They were never supposed to use that technology that way. And that's why he pulled out and got away from it. And that's why he went on Joe Rogan and started using, the mass psychosis and all that he was talking about, that got him in trouble, got him banned off of everything. And that's why he can only put his stuff on Substack now. So they already had the pseudo solution in place. That's when they started getting the lab in China, because they couldn't do that work here in America, even though we tax funded that lab. So whenever that thing got released and everybody left the planes in Wuhan and they flew around the world and landed where they had to land, that whole thing got started because of fear. It was marketed to you as the deadliest thing ever to travel the earth. Deadlier than the bubonic plague, deadlier than smallpox. It is so deadly. All you have to do is be in the same room with somebody. You just might fall. Remember, in December of 2019, there were pictures of people lying dead on the streets in China. You can't find that photograph anymore. Mm-hmm. That's how they sold it. You're walking down the street and you could just fall dead. You have to have a solution to this. And the solution was already being made. Now they won't talk about the problems that solution is causing. They won't talk about it. Doctors won't even take the reports for it and list it into VAERS. Vaccine adverse event reporting system. The doctors, if you take that solution and then report that something bad is happening to you and it didn't happen until after that solution was applied, the doctors are now dissuaded from reporting it. And they'll tell you it's all in your head, get out of my office. I mean, you and I have read those reports over and over and over again. Robert Malone, Steve Kirsch.
Peter McCullough.
Yes. And Mercola. I mean, I read those things every single day. And they're tracking all of this. Just the stuff, they're saying, okay, if only 10% of it actually gets on the VAERS report, that 10% of reporting is devastating. So all this leads to is, and you said the word 3 times in your question, fear. We can be manipulated by fear. Matter of fact, when Hitler was running Germany in the 1930s, he hired people who were absolute deadly masters at propaganda and fear. And that's what they sold. The Jews were the ones who put us in this position. They're the bad guys. If you know a Jew in your neighborhood, turn him in. He is causing you problems. He's the bad guy. And what happened? We created the most devastating loss in recorded history, right? I mean, Hitler is compared to the definition of evil because of that. And our government learned how to do that. How do we create fear to get people to do things? And so that fear translated to the whole thing about wearing the mask. And then, I wish I had been a plexiglass manufacturer back in 2020 because I could retire a billionaire right now. You know how much plexiglass got locked up and put up in every store and restaurant? And we had people actually violently confronting you because the absolute truth of the fact is if you wear your mask from the restaurant door to the table, you were safe. And then if you took your mask off at the restaurant and drank your tea, you were still in the safe zone with your mask off. But if you got up from the table and had to use the toilet, you had to put your mask back on. And we had people that were screaming at other people in restaurants about, you went to the bathroom without putting on your mask. Well, I've been sitting here at this table for 25 minutes. That's the fear. That's manipulation. And it all comes from how have we been marketing products? And when it comes down to even outside of that realm of that whole 2020 campaign debacle about what we've done to people, that was an experiment on, okay, now that we've created fear and we can actually gain control because of that fear, I can make you do things. I can make you buy things. I can make you make choices because I will make you afraid of something.
Well, yeah, and it happened at a global level, and like anyone that, if you really get into how could it actuate as quickly and uniformly as it did, there's no way that happened accidentally, right? And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just I've got two eyes and two ears, and I'm paying attention.
Oh, absolutely.
So you've got you got the BlackRock types of people that control all the money. They control all the corporations. They put pressures on people. They fund things. They, guess who got rich during all of this? Well, a lot of politicians that were tuned into what BlackRock was telling them was needed to happen. And, we can continue being illusion, but it's, you mentioned Hitler, and it's like, tyrants are psychopaths in a lot of ways, and they don't care about humanity. They don't care about individuals. They care about power. They care about these different things. And
well, if you look at Hitler, okay, we define evil by looking at Hitler. You say the word Hitler, and that is the modern day definition of the most evil thing on earth. Okay, he was responsible for sending 6 million people to work camps that worked to build things for whom? Look those things up. Who were they building for? Now, you take somebody like Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was personally responsible for 40 million deaths. Why? Not because of the same reason Hitler did. Hitler did it because he wanted to create a utopian society. And he had to weed out what he thought were weak people who didn't have the genetics to be as perfect as the people he wanted to create a society for. Joseph Stalin sent almost 5 times that many people, or over 5 times that many people, to the gulags and to the Siberian Railroad because they disagreed with him, and he was afraid that somebody was going to say something about him and take away his power. That's the tyranny that causes that kind of control. Joseph Stalin was much more evil. Now, I'm not going to compare evil for evil, and I don't ever think I'm defending, some person like Hitler. But there was more to that war than what the news reported about some house painter who suddenly decided to declare war on a certain group of people. That was much deeper and much broader than that. But as far as evil for evil and about tyranny and power and psychopaths, take a look at Joseph Stalin. That guy sent 40 million people away to their deaths. He would drag them out in the streets and shoot them in front of their kids because they spoke out. We got the same kind of thing happening in North Korea right now. Speak out about the Kims. There's only one TV station in North Korea. All they do all day is play Kim propaganda. The Kims are great. The Kims are amazing. We're in the 3rd generations of Kims. Isn't your life fantastic? Aren't things wonderful? The Kims have gotten this for you. Now, if you speak out about the chems, I'll show you how bad things can get real quick by this afternoon. That's tyranny and control based on fear. I can keep you in control by making you afraid of what happens if you're not in control. And if you stand up on your own and you actually speak what you know is the real truth, despite what you've been told, and you think, okay, something about this isn't right. Something about this just seems off, but I'm afraid to speak up because of what might happen to me. That's fear and control.
Well, you've mentioned truth several times, and I think this is a good time to tell you a little bit about a battle plan that I've created. And the reason why you're here today is because I invited you here, and I'm trying to assemble a team of what I would call digital architects. It doesn't mean you're an architect or an engineer.
I studied architecture in college.
I didn't know that before. That's not why you're invited today.
Yeah.
So, and I think the fastest way to put it into context, this platform hopefully can be used across all different things to prevent tyranny, like what we've just talked about. But let's keep it into the context of COVID. I think you and I, if we wanted to assemble a team of people we would look to for COVID-24 or whatever comes with the next election cycle or whatever, we would probably agree at least 10 people that we would say, and you mentioned several of them. I really love Dark Horse Podcast, Weinstein and Heather Heying, the people that have been truth seekers and not afraid to ask tough questions, and putting Robert Malone and Peter McCullough and these people on their platform and giving them a voice in a protected platform that's not going to be canceled or censored. So they've gone around YouTube, they've gone around Google, they've gone around these tech companies that are controlling narratives. So my goal immediately, and my battle plan has several phases, and it's as short as term as possible to all the way out. There's big changes, and I don't want to get into the weeds with all that. Here's what I want to create. The goal would be able to put, say, 20 of the top people in a real room or a simulated room, a virtual think tank or a real think tank at any level of how we're progressing into technology here. It's going to become more and more easy for you to sit in a virtual room with Robert Malone sitting at a table and have a conversation with him, right? And ask questions.
Right.
Or maybe some version of Robert Malone that he controls himself as one of his virtual, avatars. Let's not get too deep into that, but let's pretend that COVID-24 is coming. Okay. Just run this scenario.
Okay.
And we're going to put a Robert Malone, a Peter McCullough. Let's take the top journalists who have asked the tough questions and reported things. We can get into the Twitter files guys if we want, because they exposed the coercion between big government and tech to hide truth. And I think they've been through the fire. They sat in front of Congress. They took tough questions. They survived being attacked and canceled. Let's bring in some of the best evolutionary biologists out there. Let's bring in some of the best historians out there and the best lawyers out there and put them at a table and ask these questions. Who do we want sitting at that table? Do we want the people that got things mostly right over the last 3 to 4 years? Or do we want to continue listening to the broken mindset and narratives that come from the top down, the people that you talked about creating the problem, creating the solution, creating the fear to avoid the problem, and profiting on everything that touches it around it?
Right.
Or if I could own a piece in something, or I could sit at a table and be a contributor and do research because I'm passionate about this, or because I myself got things right, or I'm going to be researching it anyway for my kids because I don't want to put something in them that's going to poison them for the rest of their life.
Right.
Let's organize a platform that we can audit, that we can own, that pharma doesn't own, that corporations don't own. Even Elon Musk, who I think is doing brilliant things, he may protect the platform that we can speak on someday. But I want to go to the people for each individual tyrannical spot that could occur, and go to the people that have already stuck their neck out, have already proven that they're not in it for the money, or if they get something wrong, they'll pivot on it and say, okay, I didn't get this right here. This is what happened. This is how I'm going to solve it moving forward. And I hope you trust me. If you don't, I understand. You can go add somebody else to this think tank. But I've earned, a credit here, hopefully. And, we have all kinds of levels of think tanks. And this one primary think tank might be the one that the top 20 people are. You and I might be on one below it, but we're tapping in and listening, and we're asking questions about things that we're seeing around us, right here on the ground around us. And we're all contributing to it, and we're all holding each other accountable. Wouldn't that be nice? Just to look and be able to ask a series of questions to a group of people that you don't think are lying to you, that don't have monetary, quarterly profits to look out for, or their bosses, or ESG narratives that can only approve certain things. That's what my battle plan is trying to lay out. And so that's why you're here, because I think you tap into some energy and some pathways that we can look to moving out of these things. So let's knowing that, I wanted you to hear that, and I want the people here out here to understand it. I want to interview people that are interested in this topic. I want to interview people who can help build the platform, who might want to participate in think tanks. That's kind of the goal of this. Let's circle back around, because I feel like there's another piece that we kind of passed over real quick, and maybe you can touch on it. So you've gone down this path. You were at the police department, and then you kind of went on this spiritual healing, and then you yourself have dealt with some things from a health perspective.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about that, because I think, and here's why I want to cue it in. When I first met you, you were a much bigger guy, and I wouldn't call you necessarily muscle bound guy at that time. You were you were like most of us. You weren't doing all the things that you need to do to be the most healthy and all that.
No, I was 300 pounds of chewed bubble gum. There's no doubt about that.
But I guess part of this for me is looking at your journey. And you are teaching people lessons about here's where I was, and here's some of the things that I've dealt with. Right. Here's the options that were laid before me about how to respond to this diagnosis that I received. Here's how they wanted me to go, and here's what I decided to do. So you came to a fork in the road, and you said, "Oh, I can go down the pharmaceutical path, the narrative, or maybe I want to try some other things first. And if those don't work out, maybe worst case scenario, I'll go to that other thing." So I think this can feed right back into kind of the goal of this.
It goes right back into what are you being sold?
Right.
And why are you being sold it?
So tell us what happened to you, kind of when it happened, and a little bit of that journey there.
I had planned for my departure from law enforcement. It was originally going to happen at the end of 2020, and I was going to basically start my retirement and my pension in the spring of 2021. I left early. That's another story for another day. So I left early at September 2019, and I already had some places where I could set up to teach Tai Chi, and at that point, my business, doing just Reiki, I had no massage therapy yet. I was just doing Reiki and doing some energy work and some psychic type stuff and intuition and teaching people and all that. And I had made, like, say, X dollars. And it wasn't enough for me to replace my salary. But my thought process was, if I could take the 8 hours I'm giving to work and put that toward my business, maybe if I make X.5, that's getting closer, but I can still kind of make that happen until my pension kicks in. And so I retired in September 30th of 2019 and started teaching Tai Chi. And then, of course, we all know what happened March 13th of 2020. It was, the world shut down, everything closed up. It was a complete disaster, and all the movie stars were singing songs on YouTube and all that stuff, making us feel really, really good. And of course, they had the billboards up, "We're alone together." It just doesn't feel warm and fuzzy. Yeah, except my business closed down, right? So I started taking clients back in again at the end of that summer, and that whole year, the only money I was making was from this part-time security job, which means I was slowly going into the hole. And to say there was some stress would be an understatement. We went through 2 inheritances to stay alive and burnt up all the money I had in savings, burnt up all the inheritance, everything that we had. We basically burnt it right down to the last penny before my pension actually kicked in, because you got to be 52 to draw. And so in September of 2020, well, I would say at the beginning of August 2020, I started getting a pain in my lower abdomen. And when I retired, I was doing some personal training. People were hiring me to help train them at the gyms. And so I would go get memberships at their gyms, and I would go and train them and do all that. But whenever COVID hit, I said, well, let's just do it on Zoom. So I was working out with people over Zoom, and I would work out. I was a power lifter. Let me back up a little bit. I was a power lifter for years. I've got 4 state records. I benched 505 in contests. I squatted 625. I got videos of me with 640 going over the top of my head. I mean, I
take back that earlier comment about you not being strong. I did not know that, and I'm very sorry.
No. No, because I lifted weights my entire life. I was involved in martial arts and weightlifting and fitness and powerlifting and all that all of my life. And then I got a job working on financial crimes and sat on my butt behind a desk, and I just swolled up.
Is this where I should put the donut joke in?
Yeah, hey, that's no joke, really. I found out real quick that if you go out to eat at restaurants every day for lunch, you get fat quick. And anyway. This is where this whole story is going to go.
Right.
Okay. So, September 12th, 2020, this pain in my gut was not just after I worked out. Now it was starting to be all the time. And then on September 12th, it got to the point where, okay, I can't get up. So we went to the ER, and I thought, okay, I just blew out my appendix. So let's go in there and get this thing cut out, and let's get on with life. Appendix, okay, you're down for a couple of weeks. Okay, I can get back up and get on it. Well, they took a CT, and they said, well, there's this huge abscess all around this appendix. We can't find the appendix in there. Oh, okay, great. Well, get in there and cut it out. Well, no, that decision was never made. So I was in the hospital for 4 days on antibiotics. And they came in and said, oh, by the way, you're diabetic. And I said, no, I'm not. I basically spent my life trying not to be diabetic. And they go, well, you've gone, at the time I had gone from 320 pounds down to about 245. And they said, no, your blood sugar is 522. Your A1C is 12.7. You're going to be on insulin the rest of your life. And I said, no, I will not. You don't know who I am. This is not going to happen. I'm not going to be on insulin. So I was in the hospital for 4 days. I got out, had to go see my doctor, and I started jabbing myself with insulin, 2 different kinds, one before meals and one before bed. And he wanted to put me on metformin. He wanted to put me on, he didn't say it by name, but he said once daily injectables, which is Ozempic. And that's the route he wanted to go. And he just basically said, yeah, don't eat potatoes, and, I'll see you in 3 months. And I said, no, that's never going to happen. So I started researching how to get past this. What do you got to do? How do you fix it? And of course, I went to one of those diabetic nutrition counselors, and all she said was, don't eat rice and potatoes and cut back on carbs. Well, that didn't work either. October the 8th, I went back to the hospital for pain in my gut again. They put a drain tube in me. And so it was supposed to be for 7 days. I do this drain tube thing, which they give you, you go to the pharmacy and you get these great big syringes, okay? And it's you have a tube hanging out of your gut, and you have to squeeze this saline solution into the tube that fills up your gut, and then you pull it back out, and all these lovely different kinds of things come out of you into this syringe. And I had to do that twice a day. And I did it for 7 days and went back, and they said, no, it's not done yet. You got to do it for another. So I was in there for 15 days doing this thing twice a day, to the point where I couldn't put any fluid in and I couldn't pull anything out. So I went back on the 15th day and said, okay, I can't move any more stuff. Okay, great. It'll take care of itself. Okay, sure, fine. Well, Thanksgiving morning, my wife is making the dinner, and I can't get up off the table. I said, I'm not able to move. This is horrible. And I almost crawled into the ER on my hands and knees. And I said, okay, this is the 3rd visit for this. We got to do something now, or we're going to have a little argument, and you're not going to like me. So the day after Thanksgiving, 2020, I had my surgery. I laid in the hospital for 8 days. I lost a ton of weight. I think I'd left there at 195 pounds. And they discharged me. And So I really started putting on the diet thing at that point. I'll get into that in just a bit, with the diet. So I went home and I did my checkup with the surgeon on December 15th. Now, I had had my surgery on the day after Thanksgiving. December 15th, I go back to his office, and I was on my way to head up out of town to Jasper to go teach Tai Chi to a class I'd built up over there. And so my wife wasn't with me. And I walked into his office. I said, yeah, release me for work, man. I got to go make money. I got to go back to work now. And he goes, no. 6 weeks is 6 weeks. You don't get to go to work. But by the way, we have another problem to talk about. And he's holding his paper with a lot of highlighting on it. And I'm like, oh, okay, here it comes. I know what's happening. And so his hands start shaking, and he's doing a lot of yeah. And I go, why don't you just go ahead and say the word, big boy? I go, we're adults here. You can say it. Go ahead. And he goes, well, it was, we went in there just to remove the appendix. But when we got in there, I go, why don't you just go ahead and say it, man? He goes, well, as soon as we cut you open, that was cancer. He goes, and we had to go in there. I go, okay, how bad was it? Well, it was a stage 3.5. Now, what that means is it was in my bowel wall, right near my cecum, which is where the small intestine dumps into the large intestine, right where the appendix is on the lower right-hand quadrant of the abdomen. And the tumor was so big, and it had gotten almost through the wall of the bowel, so it would have gone out into like all kinds of other spaces. So they had to go in and take out 6 inches of colon. They took out the cecum. They took out the ileocecal valve. They found the pieces and parts of my blown up appendix in there, gathered all that junk out. And so now he says, well, we took out 15 lymph nodes, and one of them tested positive for cancer. So it's in your lymph system. It could go anywhere. It might land in your brain. It might land in your lung. It could go in your bone or your kidney or your liver. You're going to have to go on chemo. You're going to have all these things. And, I've already got you set up with an oncologist. And I looked at him. I said, no. I got this taken care of. No, I know what to do. Don't worry about me. I'm going to be fine. And he goes, no, you don't get, this is cancer. And I said, no, son, you don't understand. It's only cancer. I got this taken care of. This is easy. I'll fix this. So I go to see the oncologist they set up, and we got into a fight immediately. That just did not go well. And so I won't even, I'm just going to use the word this person because I don't want to give off a male or female vibe, and I don't want anyone trying to look this person up. But this person couldn't even tell me what the side effects were to the medicines. And I said, well, I want you to print that out and give it to me. Well, this person had to call in a secretary to go and print out the paperwork for these 3 drugs they were going to give me. And so I said, what can the drugs give me? And I looked it up. The average is 5 months of more life. So I can get 5 months of more life with the drugs that are going to make me feel like hammered dog crap. So we got into a huge discussion, and finally, after talking to some other people, they're like, hey, look, if it's anything that can help you live longer, you might as well take it. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I got another plan in mind. And I knew I was going to go see a friend of mine who is an Amish herbalist and, had worked with my dad when he had the same kind of cancer. So anyway, I called back and I said, yeah, well, I'll go ahead and do these things. And I took 2 doses. Now, when you get a dose of chemo, this is how it works. You come in there and you have to get your blood work done because they have to test your levels before you get the drug. Then you go and talk to the doctor, and the doctor says, okay, your blood levels are here across the board, so we're going to adjust the drug in these ways to make it so it will still work despite your blood levels. Then you go sit in a chair, and the nurses will come out dressed in spacesuits. And they're carrying this stuff on a tray. And then they double glove up and they wear long sleeve gloves on top of their suits to put this thing on. And I looked at them and I said, why? What? Like, I'm sitting here without all this gear on. And they said, it can't touch us. And what happens if you spill a drop on the floor? We have to move you to another station, and we have to call hazmat to come in and clean up the drop on the floor. They told me before I took this stuff, you can't have sex with your wife. If you have to go pee, you have to sit down You have to close the lid and flush twice. Everything that you touch has to be only for you. This stuff can't touch anybody else. And I said, but you're putting that inside my body. Yeah, well, you can't get it anywhere else. Well, if it's so poisonous, why are you putting it in me? Well, there's no answers for that. So I took 2 doses. And all I'm going to say about the first dose is everything moved very quickly downstairs. And things moved very quickly upstairs too. It came out both ends. I went in for the second dose. And for all the listeners out there, I'm going to have you go Google manual disimpaction, because that's a fun thing to do for 6 days. Manual disimpaction means that's the end process of sitting on the toilet knowing that you have to go but you can't. And you know that behind all of that is some hot diarrhea coming and it won't go anywhere because you are impacted. So you have to manually disimpact yourself. I'm going to leave that where that sits.
I've got a good vision.
Yes. Oh, I had a very good vision. Yeah. You'd be surprised how far a hand can go.
Wow.
Yeah. And I did that for 6 days. I sobbed on the toilet for 6 days, just crying my eyes out. So that I had to get my doses every 2 weeks on a Thursday. So for 6 days, I was doing manual disimpaction. And then after that, it was nothing but the runs. And I can remember my wife driving me over to the oncology center. And I looked at her, I don't know if I can do this. I've got 12 of these things to do, and I've only had 2. I don't know if I can do this. Like this is impossible. And I walked in and did my blood test, and I saw the doctor, and the doctor said, I can't give you your chemo today. I'm like, well, that's good. I didn't want it to begin with because I don't want to do this. They said, if we give you your chemo today, you'll be dead by Sunday. It will kill you. You have 0 white blood cells. Your body will not survive what we're going to do to it if I give you these drugs today. There's no way for you to live. So we talked back and forth, and the alternative was for them to give me a drug that would force my body to make white blood cells. So what's the side effect of that? And the doctor looked me right in the face and said, oh, you're going to love this. Very harsh pain throughout all of your large muscle groups, your big bones, and all of your joints. And you're going to hate it more than most because you're a bigger fellow with bigger muscles and bigger bones, and you're going to really hate this. And I said, well, okay. But my wife says, well, how many people on chemo have to have this drug? And he goes, 100% of them. And I said, well, how many people who get the drug complain of this horrible pain? He says 100% of them, except for the 85-year-old ladies who don't have any bones anyway. And I said, okay, so I want to make sure we're on the same page and we're reading this right. In order for me to survive the drugs that you're killing me with, you're going to give me another drug that makes me want to die. And he goes, no, you're tracking. I said, okay, unplug me, we're done. And I walked away, and I've never been back. So I did ask, because I already knew the answer, what year were these drugs invented? The answer was 1952. The drugs they were giving me were invented in 1952, and they've been soaking money off of those drugs for 70 years now. They haven't done anything. They haven't made any improvements. They haven't made any changes. This is the same drugs they invented in the 1950s, and they're still pumping people full of this stuff every single day when they get colon cancer. And they did it to me just in case. Well, it's in your lymph system. We're doing this just in case. And I said, you people are sadistic. So I left, and I went to go talk to somebody who sells herbs. And between the herbs and some of my dietary things that I had learned through my study and my research, I was able to reverse that and my diabetes. So, in my research, and I probably listened to, I had a whole lot of time at home. So I was able to listen to a lot of audiobooks because I've got an Audible account, and I read a lot of books at the same time. And this is what I have discovered. Number one, cancer is a symptom. Cancer is not a disease. You don't catch cancer. You don't eat a bad cheesecake and get cancer. You don't fall into a mud puddle and the germs give you cancer. And cancer is a symptom of one disease that has 200 different names. And the guy, Raymond Francis, wrote a book about this. There's only one disease. That disease is called cellular malfunction. The cells in the body don't work correctly anymore. And when that happens, the signal that they get that they're born with, called apoptosis, which is a programmed cell death, does not exist. Cancer cells are cells that use a different energy source, and they're never programmed to die. So all they do is replicate and keep devouring more sugar. When that happens, it erupts in your body somewhere as a tumor of some kind. The tumor is the symptom that there's a malfunction. The tumor isn't the malfunction. Doctors use chemicals to play whack-a-mole with symptoms instead of going for the source of the problem. Now, this cellular malfunction, according to the book, can come out as many different kinds of diseases. It can come out as cancer. It can come out as any one of the, I think, currently 82 different autoimmune disorders. It can come out as all kinds of different kinds of symptoms. And so if you go to the doctor and you say, wow, I've got peripheral neuropathy and I can't feel my feet. Well, they give you drugs for that. But the problem is still the cellular malfunction that caused that symptom. So they're going to keep whack-a-moling the symptoms with drugs until, well, now you've got side effects from the drugs, which they give you more drugs to whack-a-mole those things away. And I've had people that tell me, well, I only went to the doctor because I have this stomach thing going on. But I've seen 4 specialists. I've had 17 tests. I'm on 11 different kinds of drugs right now. But now I have all these problems going on with me, and I still have the same stomach problem. No one's ever found that yet. So here's a simple breakdown of what happens in the body. And this is where it comes back to, what are you being sold? So your body needs fuel to operate. The idea that we're sitting here right now, breathing air and thinking and speaking, takes energy. It takes ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It is a chemical that is made in the cell, and there's these little factories called the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. Well, there's like 1,500 of these, up to 3,500 of these in every cell. They only show it with one because they're just trying to show you all the parts of a cell whenever you go look at a cell on a picture on Google or whatever. But these mitochondria are like all throughout the cell. And what they do is they take 2 different molecules to make ATP. They take glucose and oxygen. So everything that you eat that isn't like, like the butt of a cow, it gets broken down into glucose. All right? That glucose plus the oxygen you breathe gets manufactured into ATP. And for every molecule of glucose, you can make 28 to 32 ATP. And that ATP cycles around in a furnace, and it becomes ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. And then it gathers another phosphate again, and it becomes adenosine triphosphate. And that action of you living and existing creates this cycle until it just burns out. And then you take another glucose and another oxygen, and you make more ATP. This happens 1,000,000 times a second. Okay? Now, here's the problem. Food manufacturers, the companies, the corporations that make food, and by the way, look this up. There are only 10 companies that own every food manufacturer in the United States. It is a conglomerate. It is a monopoly, and we're supposed to have laws against that, but it's okay for Nestle and Coca-Cola, all right? They take chemicals and they make food out of them. food type products. Now, I've written about this in my blog. There are only 4 ingredients that can make every food that you see on every box of brightly colored stuff on the shelves at the store. You take fake flour. That's your first ingredient. They take like whole wheat grain. Of course, it's been sprayed with glyphosate, which is Roundup. And they've had to modify the genetics of the wheat so it will survive the Roundup while the weeds around it die. So it's already been modified to withstand Roundup. Then after that, they pull all the good parts off, the endosperm and the bran and all of that has the fats in it that you need. And what you're left is the kernel, which they heat up, they dry it, they cool it, they bleach it, they wash it again, they heat it up again, they dry it again, they grind it up again. So now it's so adulterated, so refined, and so processed, it is no longer a usable, viable food. It is a filler that makes your stomach full. To the fake flour, they add fake sugar, of which currently there are 76 or 77 different names of sugar, from corn syrup to sugar alcohols to sugar solids to all these other different kinds of things, because a few years ago, we declared war on sugar, and you can't use white granular sugar anymore in your products because it sounds bad on a label. So what they do is they just change the name of it to some other stuff that you can't recognize. And if you have to go look it up, you won't, because people are inherently lazy and they want convenience. So you take fake flour, you add fake sugar to it. Then you take fake oils. Fake oils are the absolute worst thing you can put in your body. Any seed oil, any oil that you see, is an absolute nightmare for the human system. It is what causes most of our cellular malfunction. That includes every bottle of oil you find on the shelf and every kind of oil that you find on the ingredient list of every packaging of pre-made, convenient, easy food that you can find. And I'll explain oils in a minute. The 4th ingredient is flavoring. There are laboratories, and I've seen videos on this, I've read reports on this, I've done the research on this. There are laboratories where people go to work every day and they put on their white lab coats, and all they do is mix chemicals up in different combinations in order to fool your brain into 2 things. 1, thinking that you're eating real blueberry or strawberry or pineapple. And 2, making you crave to want more. Because the one thing that a food company wants more than anything is not your tasty satisfaction. They want the profit. They want to sell you something that you will say, wow, that tastes good. I got to have more. Think about that Cheez-Its commercial. They show the quote, quote, fake tasting lab, and the lady slams herself against the glass, and she goes, oh my God, they have to have more. Well, yeah, that ad was a perfect representation of how the food was developed, and they sold you on exactly what they're doing to you. They are selling you a product, and you're buying it, and it's nothing but chemicals, and your body can't process it. Now, oils. In order for them to bring out an oil, they have to take seeds. Now, this started in the 1880s. Okay, they created the cotton gin, and they said, "Wow, we don't have to rip our fingers apart pulling the cotton fibers away from the leaf anymore." And so now we can do this cheaply and easily. We can just take a whole truckload of this stuff and dump it into the gin, and we get the fibers on one side and all the junk on the other side, including all the leaf and the pod and the seeds. And somebody said, "Well, what are we going to do with all these seeds?" Well, we can take grape seeds and crush them and make seed oils, and we can take sunflower seeds and make seed oils. What are we going to do with cotton seeds? Well, they found out most seeds, you can't crush them enough to get the oil out of them. It's not cost effective. So what they do to make seed oils is they take the seeds and mix it pound for pound with hexane. And hexane chemically leaches the oils out of the seeds. Okay? Hexane also happens to be the chemical that they use to turn crude oil into gasoline. So now they got the oils out of the seed. Now, just like squeezing an orange or peeling a potato or peeling an apple, oxidation occurs. So now that you've got your olive, right? And everybody says, oh my gosh, well, olive oil, that's the gold standard of oils. You have to have it, except you can't cook with it because once you heat it up, it turns very bad. Most of these oils, when you heat them up, They chemically change. They're like a molecule away from plastic at that point. So what happens is they have to do something to keep this oil from going rancid, because in about an hour you can't sell that. It's rancid and it's horrible and it's nasty, and you can't taste it. It tastes horrible. So what they have to do is they have to heat it up, cool it down, filter it, put coloring in it so it looks good, because you don't want to eat something that looks nasty. So it's so refined and so adulterated and processed, it is no longer a natural substance. It is an artificial aberration of nature. Even the coveted gold standard, extra virgin, first pressed, cold, all that olive oil, as soon as you get the oil out of the olive, it starts going rancid. They have to process it to keep it alive. But the processing makes it dead. So now, every oil out there on the market is bad for you because it's so processed. And they always talk about the smoke point. That's the point at which it becomes something really seriously horrific. And each oil has its own different smoke point. It doesn't matter. Most of these oils you can't cook with anyway. Now, what happens when you take those kinds of oils into the body is the oils will fill up the cell. Remember when I was talking about the mitochondria? Well, the oil will fill that up, and it will fill up the cell, the cytoplasm inside the cell, and then it coats the outside of the cell, kind of like car wax. So all of your cells get this nice coating of oil on them. Now, the way that your body takes in glucose is it's supposed to take in like a potato, and take the potato and rip the fibrous matrix apart and take the glucose out of that potato. And now it gets sent off to the body and it gets carried around on the bloodstream. Sugar, the glucose, cannot get into the cell without a key. It needs to have somebody knock on the door and let it in. Insulin is that key. Insulin grabs the glucose, takes it to the cell, unlocks the door, shoves the glucose in, and the insulin vanishes. Once it puts itself into the receptor of the cell, it's done. It's over. Glucose goes into the cell, and then it gets made into energy by the use of oxygen. Okay, oxygen gets into the cell because it travels along the hemoglobin in the red blood cells. It gets into the cell by electric charge. So you have one charge on the cell, one charge on the oxygen, and as it's moving around the capillary, moving around the cell, it goes pop, and it pops in. Now the cell says, well, hell, I got oxygen and glucose. Let's make energy. Let's make muscles flex. Let's make the brain cells think. But here's the problem. Insulin can't turn the key if oil is blocking the lock. Oxygen can't get in if the oil is coating the charge. So now your brain, being so smart, and your body is an adaptive machine designed to make you survive. And your body says, well, I got an idea. Let's just make more insulin. And so the insulin, the best way I've ever heard it described was Dr. Jason Fung when he talked about his book, The Diabetes Code. He said insulin begins to act like pushers at the Japanese train stations. Japanese train stations, in order to get from a small town to Tokyo to go to work, the trains are so filled with people that if one of them dropped a $100 bill, you couldn't bend down to pick it up. So they stand on the station, and the doors of the trains have handles. And when people start to fill the train, these pushers will grab the handles and use their bodies to ram people into the train. And then the doors will shut. And they're packed in there so tightly that some people, their feet never touch the ground before they reach Tokyo. And that's what insulin does whenever you can't get sugar into the cell. Insulin says, oh yeah, I'll show you, and it starts jamming it in and making it go in. Then your insulin levels go up. And if you can't get sugar into the cell, your blood sugar goes up. And then your hypothalamus tells your pituitary, we're in trouble. We've got too much blood sugar. And it keeps going up and it keeps going up. And then you create more and more insulin. And then you have yourself a problem. Okay? That's diabetes. Your body no longer responds to insulin, even when it's getting violent about it. And the blood sugar just has no place else to go. It has to be filtered out of the kidneys. That's why you pee so much. Now, when you do get the glucose violently rammed into that cell, there's no oxygen because there's nobody there to ram oxygen into a cell. So the cell learns very quickly, I got to do something to make energy. I'll ferment the sugar. And once you start fermenting sugar without oxygen, you got cancer. You've got a problem. Because once that cell divides, it will divide without the apoptosis signal it needs to die on time. And now you have a cell that wants to ferment sugar, and it craves sugar all the time. And it keeps replicating and replicating. Now you have a problem. So the problem is not to add a chemical to the problem. The problem, or the solution, is to start taking away the sugar and starve the cancer. In 1901, the average American ate an average of 6 pounds of white sugar a year. 100 years later, 2001, the average American ate an average of 140 pounds of sugar a year. Tell me that there's not a problem. And every time you see a box on the shelf that says low fat, low sugar, low calories, gluten-free, healthy for you, the best tasting, all those little things that they put on the box, right? Please, it's brightly colored. Buy my box because I need to make $1 million. In order for them to take things out of a food, they have to put something back into the food. And in order for the labels to be something that you'll agree to buy, they have to fudge the labels up. I just recently read a book by a guy who actually made prepackaged food and was talking about how the USDA and the FDA allow you to fudge your numbers in order to meet the requirements of what it takes to sell something to the average consumer. And so if you want to sell fat-free chicken, okay, go ahead. Boil the fat out of it. But what are you going to put back into it? Because dry, tasteless chicken won't sell. So you pump sugar into it. You put a lot of salt into it. The thing is, we're so used to eating sugar and salt, we crave it so much that if I gave you a raw carrot, you would not eat it. It tastes horrible. There's nothing. I've had people say, carrots don't taste like anything. But I got a son. He says, now that I haven't been eating junk anymore, carrots are as sweet as a candy bar. Like, yes, they are. They're loaded with good taste. Most of your vegetables are very good tasting. It's just nobody notices because they're so conditioned for salt and sugar.
Let's just finish kind of the story of why you're still sitting here, because it doesn't sound like you're supposed to be sitting here right now today.
Oh, I should have died a couple of years ago. So I changed my diet to where at the time, what I started doing was fasting twice a week, 36 hours at a time, which sounds crazy, but it's quite easy. You have dinner at 6 p.m. The next day you don't eat. You have breakfast at 6 p.m. the following day, 36 hours. It can be done. You're not going to die. You're not going to crawl up on the floor in a fetal position and moan and groan and piss on yourself. Okay, it doesn't work like that. You just drink water and your belly feels full. You're okay. Keep going. All right? Secondly, take all sugar out of your diet. Third, take all the oils out of your diet. That's simple. Now everybody says, well, how do you cook without oil? I cook with broth. I cook with water. You want to do some stir fry? Easy. Take some broth, take some soy sauce, stick it in a skillet, slap the vegetables on there, bam, easy. Okay? Now, in a few months of adding the right herbal remedies and with the right diet, I was able to take my A1C from 12.7. Right now it sits at 4.8. My blood sugars normally hover around the 95 to 105 area without any medication. I am not on any prescription drugs. I'm in my 50s. So that's where I am today. And my lowest weight was 180 out of 320. And right now I'm hovering about 195.
Is that probably your fighting weight? Is that where you feel like your frame and your
I think right now,
as a 51-year-old guy, I'm right there with you as far as where I need to be. I'm not there yet.
I could stand to lose right now. I could probably go down to about 180 again right now, and I would not be bothered by it at all. It would actually be the right kind of weight.
Okay.
I think that's where I need to be. Just my schedule is so up and down and all over the place. I don't get to do anything regularly. I don't get to get up and have a day where I go, oh, I'm getting up, I'm going to do this and do that. And so for today, my diet is very simple. I don't eat any animal products. Read the China study. You'll find out why. I don't eat any processed foods at all. If I eat anything at all, it would be a very minimally processed food. But that would be about it. Like tofu is fermented. It's minimally processed. So I don't cook with any oils. I do not use microwaves. I haven't used a microwave since 2010. I've banished them from my homes. I simply don't do it. I cook everything either on the stove or in the oven, and I leave it at that. And I don't eat anything that's already been made somewhere else. I don't eat processed foods. That's the big enemy right there. And the reason is, and I'll seal it up with this: when your body is taking in chemicals it cannot recognize, your immune system mounts a defense against it. So every time you look at a box and it's got like 17 different ingredients on it, 27 different ingredients on it, your body says, uh-oh, a foreign invasion is taking place. It looks at your food like a virus and it mounts a defense. That defense has a symptom called systemic inflammation. Inflammation causes pain in the joints and the muscles. Inflammation causes symptoms. And so then you take Tylenol or ibuprofen or those other kinds of NSAIDs to deal with the pain, which causes more symptoms. And if your immune system is fighting everything you put in your mouth, do you think it has any strength left to fight a virus? It doesn't. You're making yourself sick with the food that you eat. Every meal you have, your body fights it. And once you get leaky gut syndrome, all those chemicals go right into the bloodstream, and your body has a panic attack and has to fight your dinner. That's why you get sick.
Wow, man. You've created so many pathways we can take here, and I'm excited to break those down with you here over a period of time as I ingest and digest this conversation.
And like I said, when I said before I got into this whole discussion, this is because you're being sold what to eat, because either it's a good commercial or it's a good ad, or they sell it to you because they think that by eating it, you'll be well. Oh, drink Ensure, or hey, drink this smoothie or drink that. You know, Coke has 0 calories. Sure.
Yeah, on a side note, that's one of the reasons why I've been very hesitant and slow to bring on any kind of advertisers of any sort. I mean, I really want to, in my conversations and on this path towards this apparatus, not be influenced in any way. If someone says, well, you can't say that on here, then I'm running from anyone that says that. Actually, probably going to put a spotlight on them as I'm running away from them, you know. But you know, I want to thank you for this. It's enlightening to many people. I'm sure to hear this stuff. Many of the things you've said, I've researched and have heard from many sources, and just putting it all together in a place and with a plan. I mean, part of it again for me is bringing people to the table who offer an alternative path, who can be discussing it with other people, and raising awareness to pathways to where they get in that room with the oncologist who will remain nameless, and you know, you feel like you're going to die because you are in the process of dying. You know, what are your options at that point? And I want people to have as many options as possible, whether it's the option that Joe took. Maybe there's other things out there that other people have taken. And so, like, let's put them all on the table, put them in this area where people can go and they know that pharma is not going to influence well, we got to sell these drugs. We got to sell, or the food, the food industry is not going to, well, we can't have people not eating that because that's going to hurt our next quarterly profit. I mean, there's so many things that this touches on.
Oh yeah.
From a tyranny perspective that.
Oh, and I've researched all of that.
And you're like an index book. I mean, I can't believe you don't have a note, and it's like you're just pulling things out of your, like, is it Dr. Joe Weigant? I don't know. Anyway, I want to just thank you again, and
I appreciate being here.
I think this is
being
part
able
one.
to tell people this. This is things that people need to know, but don't take the time to research for themselves.
Well, and it's conversations.
Absolutely.
Let's open up the door to people.
Mm-hmm.
Like the part of this platform is going to, everything that you just said will be indexed. It's all going to be out here in a transcript.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone in this funnel hears something that they don't agree with, there needs to be a natural apparatus that's answering those questions along the way.
Oh, sure.
And if they don't like this particular track, they can take a different track. But if it works, and it works for you, and it's worked for certainly hundreds, if not thousands of other people.
Oh, absolutely.
But we're not being told, because the media is owned by pharma and owned by all these structures that don't have our best interest at heart. That's why you and I are here today, my friend.
Pharma has made a lot of it illegal.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward already to the next one, and I hope we get it done again soon.
Bring it on, man.
It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Hey, I appreciate being here. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so all Joe's information will be in the show notes, in the description, whatever you find this video.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to give people, what's the quickest way people can get a hold of you if they're listening right now still?
My website is tristateholisticwellness.com. It's all one word. I'm on Facebook under my name, Joe Weigant, and also under my business. I can be reached on Facebook Messenger or email joe@tristateholisticwellness.com. And I'll answer any questions that you have. You might not like my answer, but I'm going to give it to you.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
All right. See you.
Thank you.